Every Friday afternoon, in homes that most people will never be invited into, Jewish millionaires perform a ritual that has been practiced continuously for over 2,500 years. They take a stick of cinnamon, hold it over a flame until it begins to release its smoke, and carry it through every room of their home while speaking ancient words that the Kabbalistic masters taught could transform the financial energy of an entire household in a single evening. This practice is directly connected to the most sacred wealth ritual ever performed in human history, the burning of the Ketoret, the holy incense, inside the temple in Jerusalem. And the Talmud makes an extraordinary statement about that incense that has been deliberately kept from mainstream awareness. In Tractate Yoma 26a, the rabbis record that the priestly families who were assigned to prepare the Ketoret became wealthy, not spiritually wealthy, not metaphorically wealthy, financially wealthy. The Talmud states this as an observable, documented fact. The preparation and burning of sacred incense, of which cinnamon was a primary ingredient, was directly associated with the accumulation of material prosperity. For centuries, this connection between cinnamon smoke and wealth has been preserved within Kabbalistic families who adapted the temple practice into a domestic ritual that any family could perform. And the financial institutions that have built their empires on your dependence have never once acknowledged that a practice this simple, this ancient, and this effective exists outside their systems. Tonight, I am going to teach you the complete ritual exactly as it was taught to me. My name is Rabbi Amram, and for the past 43 years I have devoted my life to studying the ancient texts of the Talmud and Kabbalah. My grandfather was a respected Kabbalist in Jerusalem. His father before him taught these principles in a small yeshiva in Krakow, Poland, before the war. This knowledge has been guarded within my family for 7 generations. The smell of cinnamon is the smell of my childhood. Every Friday afternoon, without exception, my grandmother would hand my grandfather a single cinnamon stick, and he would hold one end over the flame of the stove until it caught and began to glow. The smoke would rise in a thin, fragrant thread, and my grandfather would walk slowly through every room of our home, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the study where he kept his sacred texts, the living room where we gathered for Shabbat dinner, even the small hallway near the front door. He moved deliberately, as if the smoke needed to touch every corner, every wall, every surface. And as he walked, his lips moved in a quiet murmur that I could never quite hear, no matter how closely I followed behind him. The entire house would fill with that warm, sweet, ancient scent, and something about the atmosphere would shift. The air itself felt different, heavier in a way that felt protective rather than oppressive, like the house had been sealed inside something invisible and warm. I did not understand what he was doing. I only knew that after the cinnamon smoke had passed through every room, the house felt ready, ready for Shabbat, ready for blessing, ready for something I could not name but could absolutely feel. He taught me the complete practice when I was 18 years old, the night before I left home. What he revealed about the connection between cinnamon, the temple incense, and the spiritual mechanics of wealth protection was the most extraordinary teaching I had ever received, and it is what I'm going to share with you tonight. But there is one element of this ritual, a specific instruction about the direction you must walk when carrying the smoke through your home, that determines whether the practice draws wealth in or pushes it away. Without this instruction, you could perform the ritual perfectly and achieve the opposite of what you intend. You need the complete teaching, every step in the correct order. Stay with me until the very end. The moment this practice became undeniable to me was when I was 23 years old. I was living in a small apartment in Brooklyn, barely surviving, and Friday afternoons were the loneliest time of my week because they reminded me of my grandfather's home, of the warmth and safety and abundance I had known as a child, and that felt impossibly distant from the cold reality of my tiny apartment and empty cupboards. One Friday afternoon in January, the wind was howling outside, and my radiator had stopped working again. I was sitting at my kitchen table wrapped in 2 coats, and I noticed a small jar of cinnamon sticks that I had bought months earlier because the smell reminded me of home. I had never performed my grandfather's ritual on my own. I had watched him do it 100 times, but I had never done it myself. That afternoon, with nothing to lose and loneliness pressing down on me like a physical weight, I pulled a cinnamon stick from the jar, lit it over the gas stove, and walked through my tiny apartment. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. I spoke the words my grandfather had taught me, the words I will teach you tonight. And by the time I returned to the kitchen, something had changed. The apartment smelled different. It smelled like my grandfather's home. And the feeling that came with that scent was not nostalgia. It was strength. It was solidity. It was the unmistakable sensation that the space around me had been claimed, purified, sealed against whatever had been making everything in my financial life feel so heavy and so stuck. Over the following weeks, the stagnation broke. A rabbi I respected called with a teaching opportunity I had not expected. A small debt I owed was forgiven without my asking. A neighbor I barely knew introduced me to a man who became my first real business mentor. I cannot prove to you that the cinnamon smoke caused these things. What I can tell you is that I performed this ritual every Friday for the next 40 years without missing a single week, and the pattern of financial protection and steady prosperity that began that cold January afternoon in Brooklyn has never stopped. Something happens when you fill your home with the smoke of the Ketoret tradition every week before Shabbat. Whether the mechanism is spiritual, psychological, atmospheric, or some combination of all three, the results across 2,500 years of practice and across thousands of families I have personally observed are too consistent to dismiss. If this is already stirring something deep inside you, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Every week I share ancient Jewish wisdom about wealth and prosperity that has been guarded for generations. Subscribe now because what I am about to reveal tonight was never meant to leave the homes where it has been practiced in silence for millennia. I know what Friday afternoons feel like in your home. I know because I have heard it described to me thousands of times over 4 decades. Friday afternoon is when the exhaustion of the week catches up with you. It is when you feel most depleted, most drained, most defeated by whatever the week threw at you. The bills you could not pay. The work stress you could not escape, the arguments about money with your spouse that circle the same hopeless patterns. You stumble into the weekend not with excitement, but with relief that the grinding has temporarily stopped. And then Monday comes and it starts all over again. Your home absorbs all of this. Every argument about money that happened in your kitchen, every night you lay awake in your bedroom calculating debt, every moment of financial anxiety you experienced in your living room. Your home is not just a physical structure, it is a container for the emotional and spiritual energy of everything that happens inside it. And right now, your home is saturated with the energy of financial stress. You may not feel it consciously because you have become accustomed to it, the way you become accustomed to a persistent odor in a room you never leave. But it is there. And it is affecting every financial decision you make, every opportunity you perceive or miss, every aspect of your relationship with wealth. The Talmud in Tractate Pesachim discusses the spiritual atmosphere of the home with extraordinary seriousness. The home in Jewish tradition is a mikdash me'at, a miniature sanctuary. The same forces that operated in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem operate in diminished but real form in every home where people live, eat, sleep, and make the decisions that shape their financial lives. And if the temple required regular purification, regular incense, regular attention to its spiritual atmosphere, how much more does your home require the same care? The modern financial world completely ignores this dimension. It tells you that your financial problems are about income and expenses, about interest rates and investment returns. It gives you tools for managing the mechanics of money while completely ignoring the environment in which you make every financial decision. It is like a doctor treating symptoms while ignoring the fact that the patient lives in a house full of mold. You can prescribe all the medicine you want, but until you clean the environment, the illness returns. The cinnamon ritual is the cleaning of the environment. It is the purification of the space where your financial life happens, and without it, Every other financial effort you make is operating inside a contaminated container. Write in the comments right now these exact words. I purify my home for prosperity every Friday. I read every comment personally, and this declaration begins the transformation of your living space from a container of financial stress into a vessel worthy of the abundance you are building. Now let me explain why cinnamon specifically carries this power, because the selection of this substance was not arbitrary. It was deliberate, sacred, and rooted in the deepest layers of Jewish mystical tradition. In the book of Exodus chapter 30, God gives Moses the exact recipe for the ketoret, the holy incense to be burned in the tabernacle and later in the temple. The recipe contains 11 specific ingredients. Among them, cinnamon is named explicitly. The Hebrew term used is cinnamon besem, fragrant cinnamon. It was one of the core ingredients, not a secondary addition. The rabbis in the Talmud and the Kabbalistic masters in the Zohar spent centuries analyzing why each ingredient was chosen and what spiritual properties it carried. For cinnamon, they identified 3 properties that made it essential to the ketoret and therefore essential to any practice of wealth purification. The first property is elevation. The Zohar teaches that cinnamon smoke rises with unusual directness. It does not diffuse and scatter the way many types of smoke do. It rises in a clean, vertical column before spreading. The Kabbalistic masters interpreted this as a sign that cinnamon carries the energy of ascension, of upward movement, of raising what is low to a higher state. When burned in a home, cinnamon smoke symbolically and spiritually elevates the energy of the space. Financial stagnation, which the masters described as wealth energy that has become heavy and settled downward, is lifted and set into motion again. Prosperity, in the Kabbalistic understanding, does not sit still. It rises. It flows upward toward expansion and growth, and cinnamon smoke activates that upward movement. The second property is sweetness. Unlike many substances used in spiritual purification across cultures, cinnamon is not harsh, bitter, or astringent. It is sweet, it is warm, it is inviting. The Kabbalistic masters taught that this sweetness is not incidental but functional. Wealth, in the Jewish mystical tradition, is attracted to sweetness and repelled by bitterness. A home filled with bitterness, with resentment, with the acrid energy of financial arguments and scarcity thinking, repels prosperity. A home filled with sweetness, with warmth, with the energy of gratitude and abundance, attracts it. Cinnamon physically transforms the atmosphere of a room from whatever it was into something sweet. And that sweetness creates what the masters called a landing place for blessing. Prosperity, which is always flowing, finds a place in your home where it wants to settle. The third property is preservation. Cinnamon has been used for thousands of years as a preservative. In ancient Egypt, it was used in the embalming process. In trade, it was used to preserve food and goods during long journeys. The Kabbalistic tradition saw this preservative quality as a spiritual property as well. Cinnamon does not just attract wealth, it holds it. It prevents it from dissipating. A home that is purified with cinnamon smoke every week develops what the masters called a patina of preservation, a subtle but cumulative spiritual coating that keeps the prosperity within the walls from leaking out. This is why the practice must be weekly. Each session builds upon the previous one. The first time you perform the ritual, you are laying the foundation. By the 4th week, the preservation effect is noticeably stronger. By the 40th week, your home carries a depth of protective energy that visitors can feel even if they cannot name what they are feeling. These 3 properties combined, elevation, sweetness, and preservation, make cinnamon the ideal substance for domestic wealth purification. No other single ingredient carries all 3 simultaneously, and when burned and carried through a home with the proper intention and words, cinnamon smoke recreates, in accessible domestic form, the essential spiritual effect of the ketoret that made the priestly families wealthy thousands of years ago. Pause right now and write in the comments, elevation, sweetness, and preservation fill my home. This declaration aligns you with the 3 forces that cinnamon activates in the ancient tradition. Now here is the complete ritual, step by step, exactly as my grandfather taught me, and exactly as I have practiced every Friday afternoon for over 40 years. The preparation begins on Friday afternoon, ideally at least 2 hours before sundown. The Kabbalistic tradition teaches that the hours before Shabbat are a time of spiritual transition, when the mundane energy of the week is being gathered up and released to make space for the sacred energy of the day of rest. This transition period is when purification is most effective because the old energy is already loosening its grip on the space, making it easier to sweep clean. Before you begin, open at least one window in your home. Even if it is cold outside, even if only slightly, one window must be open. The masters taught that smoke purification works by absorbing negative energy from the space, and that energy must have an exit point. If all windows and doors are sealed, the smoke absorbs the stagnation but has nowhere to carry it. The negative energy simply recirculates. One open window creates the exit through which the old energy leaves as the cinnamon smoke pushes it out. Take a single cinnamon stick. It should be a whole stick, not broken, not a fragment. The wholeness of the stick represents the wholeness of the blessing you are inviting. A broken stick, according to my grandfather, carries the energy of incompleteness, and incompleteness is not what you want to invite into a wealth purification practice. If you can find Ceylon cinnamon rather than cassia, it is preferable, as Ceylon is considered closer to the biblical cinnamon besom. But any whole cinnamon stick will work. Light one end of the cinnamon stick using a candle flame rather than a match, or lighter if possible. The Kabbalistic tradition prefers candle flame because candles are vessels of sustained light, and lighting the cinnamon from a candle transfers that quality of sustained illumination into the smoke. Hold the cinnamon over the flame until the tip glows red and begins to produce a steady thread of smoke. It should not be blazing. It should be smoldering. The smoke should be gentle and continuous, not thick and overwhelming. If the flame catches and the stick begins to burn actively, blow it out gently until only the glowing ember and the smoke remain. Now here is the instruction I warned you about at the beginning. The direction you walk determines whether the smoke draws wealth in or pushes it out. You must begin at the room farthest from your front door and walk toward the front door, not away from it, toward it. This seems counterintuitive. Most people assume you should start at the entrance and move inward, bringing the blessing in. But the Kabbalistic tradition teaches the opposite. You are not bringing something in with this practice. You are pushing something out. You are sweeping the stagnant, heavy, scarcity-laden energy from the deepest corners of your home and driving it toward the exit. You begin at the back and push forward, the way you would sweep a floor, moving everything toward the door where it can leave. If you walk in the wrong direction, starting at the front door and moving inward, you are pushing the stagnant energy deeper into your home, compressing it into the most intimate spaces where you sleep and where your children sleep. This is why the direction is critical. Wrong direction does not just fail to help, it makes the situation worse. Walk slowly through each room, allowing the smoke to reach every corner. When you enter a room, move in a clockwise direction around its perimeter. Clockwise in Kabbalistic tradition aligns with the direction of chesed, of blessing and positive flow. As you walk and the smoke fills each room, speak these words with calm, steady conviction. I release what does not serve this home. I release the weight of financial worry. I release the echoes of scarcity. This space is purified. This space is elevated. This space is sweet. This space is ready to receive and hold the blessing of abundance. Speak these words in every room, the same words every time. The repetition is not redundant. Each room in your home carries its own specific energy. Your kitchen, where food is prepared and where the relationship between money and sustenance is most physically manifest, often holds the densest financial anxiety. Your bedroom, where you lie awake, calculating and worrying, holds the energy of sleepless financial stress. Your living room, where family gathers and where many financial conversations or arguments occur, holds the energy of whatever was discussed there. Each room needs to hear the words. Each room needs the smoke to pass through and absorb what has accumulated there. When you reach the front door, stand there for a moment and allow the last of the smoke to drift toward the open window or out the door itself if it is open. Then say these final words: "What was heavy is now lifted. What was stagnant now flows. This home is sealed with sweetness. Prosperity enters freely and remains. This is complete." Then extinguish the cinnamon by pressing the glowing end into a small dish of salt. Salt, in the Kabbalistic tradition, represents preservation, and extinguishing the cinnamon in salt seals the purification. Do not extinguish it with water, which the masters taught dilutes the intention. Do not simply let it burn out on its own, which leaves the practice without a clear conclusion. Seal it in salt. The ritual has a beginning, a middle, and a definitive end. Close the window after a few minutes. The purification is complete. Your home has been swept clean of stagnant financial energy, filled with the sweet smoke of elevation and preservation, and sealed with intention and salt. The space is now prepared to receive and hold the blessing of Shabbat and the prosperity of the week to come. Write in the comments right now: "My home is purified, elevated, and sealed with sweetness" every Friday. I read every comment, and your public commitment to this weekly practice strengthens the intention each time you honor it. Now let me explain what happens beneath the surface when you practice this ritual consistently, because understanding the mechanism deepens the effectiveness. The Talmud's statement that the priestly Ketoret families became wealthy is not an isolated claim. It is connected to a broader Talmudic principle about the relationship between the spiritual atmosphere of a space and the financial outcomes of the people within it. The rabbis observed across centuries that families who maintained the spiritual hygiene of their homes, who did not allow negative energy to accumulate unchallenged, who actively purified their living spaces on a regular basis, consistently outperformed families who ignored this dimension entirely. The Ketoret priests were the most dramatic example because they worked with the most powerful form of incense in the most sacred space on earth. But the principle applies at every scale. Your home is your temple, the cinnamon is your Ketoret, and the effect, while less dramatic than the temple incense, is real, cumulative, and powerful. Modern psychology provides a parallel framework for understanding why this practice works. Research has consistently demonstrated that your physical environment profoundly affects your cognitive function, your emotional state, and your decision-making quality. A cluttered, stagnant, anxiety-laden environment produces cluttered, stagnant, anxiety-driven decisions. A clean, intentional, pleasant-smelling environment produces clarity, creativity, and confidence. The cinnamon ritual physically transforms the sensory environment of your home. The scent triggers warmth, comfort, and a sense of safety. The act of walking deliberately through each room creates a physical experience of ownership and intention. The spoken words redirect your conscious attention from scarcity to abundance. Together, these elements reconfigure your internal state from anxiety to authority, from scarcity to receptivity. And from that reconfigured state, you make fundamentally different financial decisions, perceive fundamentally different opportunities, and relate to wealth in a fundamentally different way. The financial institutions that dominate the modern world understand the power of environment better than anyone. Banks design their buildings to make you feel small, dependent, and in need of their expertise. Investment firms create elaborate offices that project authority and competence, making you feel incapable of managing your own wealth. Credit card companies use color psychology, language manipulation, and environmental design to trigger the impulse spending that drives their profits. These institutions weaponize environment against you every single day. The cinnamon ritual is your counter-weapon. It is the deliberate, intentional curation of your own environment, the space where you actually live and make decisions, in alignment with principles that predate these institutions by thousands of years. They control the environment of their spaces. This practice gives you control of yours. Let me share my deepest personal experience with this practice. When my grandfather passed away, I inherited the small ceramic dish he used to extinguish his cinnamon in salt. It was stained dark from decades of use, the salt in the bottom infused with the residue of 1,000 Friday afternoons. I placed it in my own home and used it for the first time the Friday after his funeral. As the cinnamon smoke rose and I spoke the words he had taught me, I wept. Not from grief alone, but from the overwhelming realization that I was continuing something unbroken, that the smoke rising from my cinnamon stick was the same practice, the same words, the same intention that had risen from his cinnamon stick every Friday for 60 years, and from his fathers before him, and from his grandfathers before that. I was standing inside a chain of practice that stretched back through centuries, through exile, through persecution, through the destruction of the temple itself, all the way to the original Ketaret burning on the altar in Jerusalem, and that chain was not broken, it was alive, in my hands, in my home, in the sweet smoke that filled every room of my house. That evening, at Shabbat dinner, my family sat in a home that smelled of cinnamon and felt different from every other evening. My wife noticed it. My children noticed it. There was a peace in the air that went beyond the absence of work and obligation. It was a presence, the presence of something ancient and protective and generative, and I understood that my grandfather had not simply taught me a ritual. He had given me a living inheritance, a practice that purifies the space where wealth is built, where children grow, where families are sustained, a practice that costs almost nothing but protects everything. Over 43 years, I have taught this ritual to thousands of families. The pattern is remarkably consistent. Families who practice the Friday cinnamon purification consistently for at least 8 consecutive weeks report a noticeable shift in the atmosphere of their homes. They describe it as lighter, clearer, more peaceful, and the financial dimension follows. Decisions become less anxious and more deliberate. Arguments about money become less frequent and less intense. Opportunities that had seemed invisible begin to surface. The overall experience of wealth shifts from a source of constant stress to something more manageable, more grounded, more directable. Not because the cinnamon magically deposits money in their accounts, but because the environment in which they relate to money has been fundamentally purified. And a purified environment produces purified decisions, and purified decisions produce better financial outcomes. This is cause and effect, operating through a mechanism the ancient rabbis understood and the modern world has forgotten. This practice costs almost nothing. It takes less than 15 minutes. It requires no expertise, no special training, no permission from any authority. And it addresses the one dimension of your financial life that no bank, no advisor, no investment strategy, and no budget has ever touched. The spiritual atmosphere of the space where you make every financial decision of your life. If this teaching awakened something inside you that you did not expect, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Every week I share ancient Jewish wisdom about wealth, prosperity, and financial protection that has been guarded within families for generations. This is not content, this is transmission. And each teaching builds upon the last to give you a complete system of wealth wisdom that has sustained Jewish prosperity across millennia. Leave a comment right now and write, "Every Friday my home is purified with the smoke of ancient wisdom." I read every single comment, and your public declaration creates a covenant with yourself that grows stronger each week you honor it. If you know someone whose home feels heavy, whose financial life feels stuck, whose environment carries the weight of stress and stagnation, share this video with them right now. A single cinnamon stick and 15 minutes every Friday could begin a transformation that no financial product on earth can provide. And hit the like button so this ancient wisdom reaches every home that has been waiting, unknowingly, for the sweet smoke of the Ketaret to finally arrive. May the smoke of cinnamon carry every burden from your home and leave only sweetness behind. May your walls absorb the energy of abundance and your rooms hold the warmth of prosperity. May what was heavy be lifted and what was stagnant begin to flow. May your home become the sanctuary it was always meant to be, purified weekly by a practice that has protected Jewish wealth since the days of the Holy Temple. May your family sit down to dinner each Friday evening in a space that has been made ready for blessing. And may the sweetness that fills your home on Friday evening follow you into every room, every decision, every financial act of the week to come. Shalom.